Here with us today for the panel discussion are two very experienced and exceptional panelists. The first member is the President of Privatization and Corporatization Board, Mr. Asim Mohamed, and the second, Ms. Fathimath Abdulla Kamaaludheen, Deputy CEO of Capital Market Development Authority. The moderator of this panel is Ms. Mariyam Visam. We have all witnessed the insightful presentation of Ms. Visam, and she is here joining us to moderate this panel. So without further ado, panelists, kindly please join me on the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today at this panel discussion about privatization, I would first like to lay down the objective of this panel discussion. We have just now received a very insightful presentation by the Ministry of Finance, specifically Privatization and Corporatization Board, I believe. The objective of this panel discussion is, number one, to discuss the difference between corporatization and privatization, and we would also like to highlight global trends and approaches taken by developing countries in comparison to the approach that we are taking here in the Maldives. And we would also like to speak about corporate governance. There are two types of frameworks, as you all know. The Privatization and Corporatization Board, PCB, has introduced a specific corporate governance framework for state-owned enterprises, and CMDA has a specific corporate governance framework targeting the listed companies and public companies. So I often, in fact, in preparation for this panel discussion, we had a very good discussion between Ms. Fathimath Abdulla Kamaaludheen and I would call FA, and PCB chair. In fact, I was asking, because there's often this misconception about, yes, we have a list of state-owned enterprises, and what are the objectives of these state-owned enterprises? In fact, it posed the question, what's the difference between corporatization and privatization? Don't you think it's important to compare the differences and similarities and share some insight to the audience as to how state-owned enterprises are formed, and from there onwards, what are the roles and responsibilities of the Privatization and Corporatization Board? So the first question, corporatization and privatization, how is it interrelated, and does the success of one process guarantee the success of the other? I would like to pose this question to PCB Chair.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting to this forum. And it's really an honor and pleasure to be with such a professional body of people. And I don't normally appear in this kind of panels, but here we are. Thank you. And so far, the whole forum has been good, and we have had such insightful panel discussions on various topics. And as PCB president, I get to tackle the topic of privatization today. And this is a topic that is on everyone's mind, and then people think of PCB as this very powerful body that can go on privatizing SOEs every day. But I guess obviously there are legal limitations and practical limitations to as what PCB can do and what PCB should be doing, I guess. So we basically try and highlight on those areas and respond to Ms. Visam's question as to what's the distinction here. PCB Act basically says, and as the name suggests, it's basically privatization, corporatization, and monitoring and evaluation, right? So the first aspect of the whole legal framework is in very detail what we should be doing in terms of privatization. So basically, that is already state-owned enterprises to be, through a certain policy and regulation, decide to privatize or offer a stake of the company through any number of models to the public or to a private entity. So be it an IPO, be it to a trade sale, or be it a strategic partnership, any number of models which we obviously have a policy on. Now, based on law, what we are required to do is to come up with a set of regulations to regulate privatization. I guess this is related to past experiences of how the governments have handled privatization. So therefore the PCB law, and we needed to have a certain list of regulations that will make it public and transparent, the whole process of privatization. The other aspect of the law that we are required to come up with is a privatization policy, which basically details the whole procedural aspect of privatization and the models which we could adopt in terms of privatization. And together with the policy, we are supposed to have a divestiture sequence plan on number of SEOs, or a particular sequence of SEOs that we could propose to privatize, and then models of privatization of the same. But that policy has to be apparently approved by the government. That's what the law says. So we have basically done the regulations, all the regulations that's prescribed in the law, and then published, and they're in the Gazette. So that basically gives accountability and transparency of the whole process of privatization if the government decides to privatize certain SOE. So basically, from the beginning to the announcement stage, to the bidding, tendering, evaluation, post and pre-auditing processes, and to the allocation of the resources, there's a number of regulations already gazetted that regulates the process of privatization. So that, I guess, gives more transparency and confidence to the process. The second aspect with regard to the policy has to be approved by the government, and then the divestiture sequence that we choose and the SOEs that we decide to private, that has to be selectively approved again by the government. The distinction that I would like to make with the common understanding that public might have is that we are not owners of these companies. So we don't decide the ownership policy. Obviously, SOEs are owned by the state or the government. So the government decides policy, and I do understand and I do appreciate that this clarity should be there. But the law is a bit hazy in terms of whether we are an oversight body or a regulatory body, because what exactly we can regulate and punitive actions we can take is not so clear, right? So these are the areas that we could work on and probably improve on. But since government has no clear decision or has not communicated the privatization divestiture sequence plan and their policy on privatization, we are not able to go further beyond that at this stage. The second part of our law is corporatization. That's basically where the government decides to change a government agency or a department or a certain service to a corporate model, right? That again has a certain provisions in the law how we should go about. We should have a corporate charter. What would happen to the HR functions or the employees of that department, and how would assets and all this should be transferred. So that should be given in detail in a charter, in a corporatization plan, what is called corporate. In the law, it's called corporate charter. So this is the basic distinction. One is an existing SOE already being sold to, or shares being given to the public or a private party. That is, I guess, privatization. And the corporatization aspect is just corporatizing or changing to a corporate model an existing government department. Now, since this board has come, our board has come to office, we haven't done any privatization of any SOE as of yet. But we did corporatize one government department, which is now an SOE, that is Regional Airports Development Corporation. So basically, that's quite quick update on the work we have done so far. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to pose the question to CMDA. As an organization that advocates for better corporate governance in corporates, be it private, state-owned enterprises, and also listed companies, what role can the CMDA play, especially in the spectrum of issues that the state-owned enterprises are facing today, and what kind of a facilitating role can the CMDA play for to encourage SOEs to comply with corporate governance requirements?
Thank you, Visam. First of all, thank you, CA Maldives, for giving me this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here. Coming back to your question, what role can CMDA play in terms of facilitating the privatization process? There are many approaches to privatization. It could be a direct sale, it could be through public float. I think regardless of the approach we take towards privatization, the common essential element is definitely the requirement to implement corporate governance. And I think that's where CMDA can play a very important role. CMDA has been in the forefront in promoting corporate governance nationally in the country. We are the first to come up with the National Corporate Governance Code. We have made compliance to the CMDA CG code mandatory to all listed companies, and we also have had an initiative whereby we opened voluntary adoption of CMDA CG code to all other companies as well, including SOEs. And we are on top of the evolving standards in corporate governance arena, and CMDA is very well positioned, and we have affiliations with international bodies as well as regional bodies who are working to bring a good corporate governance practices into the investing and financing world. So I think that's where CMDA can play a very important role in collaboration with the PCB in uplifting the CG compliance of state-owned enterprises, and also to bring it to a level that is accepted by global investors as well.
We have often, I think we have often heard state-owned enterprises, basically the board of directors and managing directors, raise concerns over the requirements and believing that it's not necessarily one size that fits all. And some of the state-owned enterprises, we often say that even in the presentation, I think it became obvious to everyone in the whole that not all the state-owned enterprises are designed to make a profit. Some of these corporatized businesses, they are basically in the process of providing essential services, and we may not necessarily, let's say, if we are to give a rating or grading to these state-owned enterprises, not all of them will be the ready to go companies that can eventually float a percentage of their shares, or even form a joint venture with, let's say, strategic partners. So my question is, what are the obstacles faced by the existing state-owned enterprises when it comes to expanding their businesses and trying to position themselves as a company that complies with the corporate governance requirements, and at the same time positioning as a company that is, I would rather term it as accepted by the general public, because as we continuously say, these are, whether we like it or not, these are public interest companies, and the public has an expectation over the companies, and we often see that the public has, like, for example, say if they have created an expectation over MWSC or MTCC, the same expectation is stretched across all the state-owned enterprises with a view that the government should not engage in business. So my question is, what are the obstacles faced by state-owned enterprises? I'm sure that through the monitoring activities of PCB, you must have come across a lot of issues and challenges that they have taken up with you, and how should we look at state-owned enterprises as we go ahead? Over to you, President of PCB.
Thank you, Mr. Saab. Yes, the third aspect of our regulation law is obviously monitoring and evaluation of SOEs, right? And then culturally or traditionally, what has happened is there was no specific body that monitors and evaluates the performance of SOEs is the way we have it now under law. So basically, the PMAP department in Ministry of Finance was overseeing these SOEs. And the SOEs has a culture of basically, by law, they are again independent legal institutions. So their board is ultimate trustees and they're accountable for their policies and decisions and the way they conduct business. So basically, the board was basically the decision maker and a lot of SOEs, boards, they do their own thing. They have their different own policies that are very, very different from each other. So obviously public interest being SOEs, and SOEs by definition should be and ought to be created for the greater public interest where markets fail. But obviously there are certain SOEs that doesn't fall in that category, but when we started sort of evaluation work, first tool that we came up with was corporate governance code that we wanted to apply for all SOEs. That was in 2019. Obviously, there was another set of corporate governance code that was adopted and used by CMDA, and that was applicable to all the listed companies, and that required certain disclosures and reporting standards in terms of under their listing rules. But as we have seen, once you start to adopt and comply with certain corporate governance rules and improve your governance, basically it's good business. Your business also, performance also improves. So first and foremost is to have good corporate governance, I guess, and that corporate good governance is good business. So if SOEs also wants to do better and perform better and sort of remove those obstacles in terms of facing their challenges, whatever, be it financing or public confidence, I think they basically needs to improve their corporate governance. So in that respect, because CMDA law and governance code doesn't cover the rest of the SOEs, as we have seen that we have some 32 SOEs that we do monitor, and about 24 of them are 100% government-owned companies. So there are another 9 either public listed or jointly owned by private parties. So under the corporate governance law, we have a number of key indicators that we wanted SOEs to perform against. Right? They should have a strategic plan. For example, they should have a strategic plan. They should have a board performance evaluation mechanism, and they should have, and we have set certain standards in terms of internal audit functions, the CFO standards. So they should be instituting these functions there, and standard SOPs and so forth. So since we launched this corporate governance code, we started reviewing the performance of these SOEs against corporate governance code. Back we started, most of the key indicators were way below 50%, and most of the SOEs were not basically complying into basic governance standards, like having a proper strategic plan, annual business plan, performance mechanisms for boards, and so forth. So, but it's gradually improving, and our code is basically comply and explain guideline at the moment. So those who are unable to perform, for whatever reasons, resources or something, basically at this stage they have to explain. But continuously monitoring and giving the right assistance, they are able to bring up these indicators. And in the third year of the review, that was last year, we see that certain indicators have gone up to 80%, although the weakest area still seems to be in the risk areas and performance management areas of the board. So we're working on them. So the short answer to the question is obviously to improve governance, to do better and gain public confidence. The second element, the second area where SOEs were systematically failing in public confidence is, I guess, in terms of procurement and the various practices that we have been hearing in relation to SOEs. So different SOEs, again, as I highlighted at the outset, obviously the boards set their policies and different boards have different policies. Obviously, there is some justification for that because different SOEs are different in terms of their sizes and the industries they operate. So they might require certain policies that are different. But through a technical assistant and consultation with our local consultant over the last 3 years or so, we have now finally come up with a harmonized procurement guideline policy for SOEs, because SOEs do not fall under the Public Finance Act for being independent legal institutions. So now basically we have a set of principle-based procurement guidelines that SOEs should adopt, which gives flexibility to industry and size of the industries. And this is following on from the Corporate Governance Code. So procurement guideline was launched in 2021. Now obviously there are exceptions that SOEs want to opt out of it, giving a number of reasons, because obviously, like you said, they claim that this doesn't fit, everything doesn't fit. But our stand is that at least there should be basic principles that should apply to everyone. Maybe the figure, the amount, maybe we can tweak around and give exceptions. But let's try and apply the basic thing first. So basically, we are asking them to comply for the first 2 years and try to adopt their policies based on our principles, harmonized guidelines, and then get back to them and see what their difficulties are. Like I could understand, I mean, Road Development Corporation would be obviously different from MACL, what Island Aviation might have to procure. So even a small company like TradeNet might be totally different. And again, their business model might not be a commercial model as opposed to a service model, I mean, Asanda. So we have to work around few things. And in terms of performance management, we are trying to manage those areas specific to SOEs and kind of services they give. So at the moment, performance management is also a bit of on a commercial model. This is the challenges they bring it to us, because all the SOEs cannot be measured under a commercial model. But we are trying to differentiate or at least separate the operational element from the service element, so that basically operationally everyone has to be efficient to a certain indicators. So once, I guess those challenges should could be overcome, improve the governance, harmonize the procurement policies as per our policy guidelines, and then do the performance as per the indicators. Now, the public confidence should increase as we go on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was, I think, a very well-rounded response to my question. Thank you. I would like to ask you, from the presentation, I think it was quite obvious that there are some large state-owned enterprises that could perhaps be privatized in the future. So, but again, having said that, this is a very sticky area. There has to be a lot of key stakeholders whose policies are to be aligned for the purpose of completing the entire privatization process. The market, the timing for the market has to be right. We have to get the right year, and also we have to make sure that the public has enough appetite for such a market placement. So considering the two broad types of approaches that any state-owned enterprise may take, I would like to ask for your guidance on what new platforms can the state-owned enterprises explore rather than initially convert into a public company, and what are those things that they should ensure if they are at all considering offer for sale or offer for subscription?
Thank you again, Visam. I think looking at the past experience in the capital market, and because there have been very low activity in the capital market, there's doubt in the minds of the decision makers whether capital market can cater sufficiently to a public float that's done by a SOE. I think to that question, we have seen recent IPOs, and if you look at the statistics, we see increasing participation of retail investors as well as institutional investors. We were surprised to see that in the recent IPOs, there was participation from retail investors from across all atolls of the country as well. And we all know that the pension fund is also actively seeking capital market investments, and we are seeing in recent days public is investing in unregulated activities as well. So these are all reflective of the fact that there is excess liquidity. There is liquidity in the market to channel to securities investments. There is appetite in the market for securities investments. But so this is the reason why we are saying we tend to believe that it's actually not so much of an issue on the demand side, but it is, I think, more of an issue on the supply side. Good quality investments need to come to the market, need to open up in the market to see the real potential of market financing. So I think that's where the stakeholders can invest their resources in. We can come up with strategies to create awareness among the companies and projects, owners of the projects who are exploring financing options to come to the capital market and explore the potential of the capital market. And speaking about alternative financing mechanisms available in the capital market, in the earlier panel, as our CEO also highlighted, we have brought in a new access to finance product, Vienna platform. It's called the private securities segment. With that framework, we have made the capital market all-inclusive, an all-inclusive market where we don't exclude any company. So under the framework, even SOEs, private companies and SMEs have opportunities to tap market financing options. Mostly, we have targeted debt listings under the new framework, but we have developed a concept to incorporate equity financing as well. And under the new framework, we have included many flexibilities, options like securitization schemes, and we have also removed the hurdles that are not necessary to be included in the regulatory framework, but we have kept the necessary requirements because that is essential for investor confidence. So we have developed a framework which can be used by SOEs as well, and we encourage all SOEs to also explore the new alternative financing options available in the market.
Thank you. I think with that response, it has become apparent that the Vienna portal is also a mechanism for the state-owned enterprises to raise finance, and that's also, I believe, another option. My next question is to the president of PCB. This is basically a surprise question. I mean, today we have heard about the ESG award, and I was wondering, I mean, I can't very well remember whether the Ministry of Finance, PCB's Corporate Governance Code has relevant provisions about sustainability reporting and reporting of non-financial information. But I'm just wondering, what would be the next course of action on your part? Because we have often seen that the private sector, they usually, to some extent, follow the path of the state-owned enterprises. And I was thinking it would be an ideal opportunity to set the state-owned enterprises themselves as good examples in this initiative. So I was just wondering whether has there been any development on incorporating ESG reporting as part of the corporate governance framework, and what would be the next course of action from your part?
Thank you, Visam. That's a relevant question to us, I guess, in the context of the activities here. Our corporate governance code, and I think some of the speakers here highlighted, one of the fundamental weaknesses the SOEs have is basically corporate governance and reporting. The boards has continuously, I guess I should say, have failed to perform their fiduciary responsibilities in terms of making them responsible and report. We would expect most of the bigger performing and cash-rich companies to at least do their annual reporting. And we find that lots of SOEs actually just do the basic minimum of reporting the audited financials and then approving it AGM and that they file it. But our CG code requires them to publish annual report, and which part of the annual report is obviously the governance report, and part of that is the sustainability report. So there's a extensive component of NO reporting in our corporate governance code, which SOE is lag behind in terms of its compliance. But systematically, we are seeing that certain companies are doing better. I mean, I don't see why when public listed companies like MTCC are doing wonderful, and BML are doing good jobs in terms of publishing their reports, smaller companies, why smaller companies cannot do it, but they should. So we are sort of following them, pushing them, and then getting there, but not there yet. I mean, I said at the outset, when we first reviewed corporate governance, everything, almost all the indicators were way below 50%. So it's gradually improving to 80% in most of the indicators when we did last year. So when we launched corporate governance, our thinking was related to your question, ESG, is that we should have a corporate governance award as well to SOEs. But then some of the feedbacks we received then was that we just introduced it, give us some time to adapt, get our systems and processes in place, and then maybe measure or test us against maybe down the line 2 years. So basically, our thinking was we introduced our corporate governance award down 2 years, so maybe we'll be launching our award next year. So we believe we have given sufficient time to all the SOEs to comply, and because it's been out there and we have been continuously engaged with them, and we have had series of meetings since last year with specifically on governance with MDs, company secretaries, and the chair, directly communicating with them the gaps in corporate governance in terms of against our reviews. So I mean, this shouldn't come as a surprise now. So I think we are in a better position to introduce the award, and that would be one component of ESG award. So as I understand from the CA Maldives, and as we have heard from some of the other speakers, we can't wait till everybody is ready. So they have launched ESG report, so we will launch our review report, the corporate governance review report, and the rest of the standards and systems and should come in. And I think once you give the push, people act. So we should be getting there. Thank you.
Thank you. My question to FA is CMDA CG code. We have basically included, when I say we, I also sit on the board of directors of CMDA. So we have seen, of course, a lot of companies putting an effort to share social responsibility aspects of their business. But I believe that, I think this is also a question that I want to throw to the floor and the executives of CA Maldives. I think there's a need to have a reporting requirement in the sense the aspects or the details of the reports has to be set out as a standard to facilitate businesses to comply with the standards. So I would like to ask what has been the progress of listed companies and other companies in terms of sustainability reporting, and do you, I mean, similar to my observation, do you also find a room to room for, let's say, for example, the CA Maldives or any other relevant agency to come up with certain standards that corporates can adhere to in terms of reporting on non-financial aspects of their businesses?
Thank you. Sustainability reporting was a voluntary requirement under the CMDA-CG code until the revisions we brought to the CMDA-CG code last year. Last year, we brought a revision to the CMDA-CG code under which we have now made sustainability reporting a mandatory requirement for all the listed companies. So effective next year, they have to include sustainability reports in their annual reports. I think it was very timely for AG office to take the initiative to meet with all the stakeholders, including CMDA and PCB, to discuss introducing a unified guideline to do sustainability reporting. We have formed a technical committee to review the international exposure guidelines that are discussed in the international platforms, how it can be replicated to the Maldives and how it can be applied uniformly on all sectors, including the SME sector as well as the public listed segment. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to, now that we have just barely 40 seconds to go, I would like to give the opportunity to the President of PCB and Deputy CEO of CMDA to share your concluding remarks with the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam. Yeah, just in concluding, I would just like to highlight where we would go. We ideally would like to go, PCB. We would like to act as a professional body adding value to the government in terms of management of SOEs. At the moment, obviously, there are gaps in the law, and there is a disconnect between the policy aspect of policy side and what we are supposed to do. I think that needs to be bridged. We are not aware of the ownership policies of when certain SOEs are created, or if government decides to dissolve it. So there has to be a proper communication in terms of communicating the ownership policies of SOEs and how we should be reviewing and measuring against those policy objectives of the government in terms of performance of these SOEs. The other area that we would like to touch is now, since we have done the corporate governance and also launched procurement guidelines, and the other issue of public interest and in terms of irregularities and improper practices is obviously the broad area of HR and recruitment. So we would like to work on an harmonized HR policy guideline where SOEs can adopt and again be on par with a certain standard or best practices that they can use. A lot of the SOEs, what we hear and what we see, and it's on the media, is a lot of SOEs now have policies where their MDs can decide or has a discretion to hire and fire, and then obviously somehow related to certain cycles of political activity. So that should be, I think, minimized, and in the coming year we try to work on that. And then also we are working on a CSR policy or a guideline. We should also regulate their CSR activities. So there are certain good things on our plan, and just to share with. And otherwise, it's been a pleasure to have to be here, and we have so far enjoyed it. Tomorrow we have another interesting conference again, ACC and TMA, where we talk about SOE corruption. So it'll be interesting there as well. Thank you so much, everyone.
Over to you, Fa.
Just very briefly, I think all the stakeholders should join hands to promote market financing because of the benefits it has for the companies as well as to all the stakeholders and to the country. So I think CMDA has done and is doing its level best to come up with new concepts and new products that can be used by companies for financing, for meeting their financing requirements, and all the stakeholders can jointly make use of these opportunities that are created in the market. That's my concluding remarks.
I think thank you, Fa. I think it's time for us to conclude our session. I hope that during this panel discussion, all of you have received more information about the initiatives of PCB, how it has been looking at corporatization and privatization, and also the monitoring function, alongside the opportunities that can be available through the capital market, and how the corporate governance codes and the frameworks can converge eventually for state-owned enterprises that will perhaps float in the near future, depending on the plans of the government. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, panelists, for the captivating discussion. Please remain on stage as we'd like to give you a token of appreciation. I'd like to request Mr. Hassan Ziyat, former president of CA Maldives and former AG, on stage to give away a token of appreciation for the panelists. Mr. Asim, Ms. Fathimath, and Ms. Visam. Thank you all.